Do want to get to some breaking news out of the Middle East as we are taking a live look over the Israel-Gaza border. The Houthi rebels have now fired another ballistic missile at Israel this morning, triggering sirens across the center of the country and over in southern Israel for the third time in less than a week. The Israel Defense Forces saying that it managed to intercept the missile before it entered Israeli airspace. Now, according to a military source that spoke to the Times of Israel, the projectile was shot down using the long-range Arrow air defense system, which is designated to take out ballistic missiles outside of the atmosphere. So much to discuss out of the Middle East, as always, so I do want to bring in Dr. Asaf Romirowsky, the Executive Director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us.
Thank you, as always, for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, first off, we are now talking about another missile fired by the Houthis in Yemen. Does it seem as though they are heating up their action against Israel, as we are hearing a lot about these missiles being fired?
For sure. I think that, the Houthis see all of this as part of what they define, where they define the first attack as Palestine 2. They see the entire narrative that you're coming out of the Houthis rhetoric-wise. You're seeing them supporting of what they define as their brothers in Gaza. And clearly the ongoing onslaught of attacks proves that they are getting more sophisticated. They've been able to have much more successes in their attacks. Remember, at the beginning of the war, they were only firing at the southern part of Israel, going to the city of Eilat, which is the southernmost city inside of Israel. And now they're hitting center parts of Israel itself, Tel Aviv, Jaffa, and they're able to intercept and really get through the missile system, the missile defense system that the Israelis have. While this attack thankfully was able to be thwarted before it got inside of Israel, we did see the other day where buildings and the schools were hit, projectiles all over the place, and it's hitting and it's getting through the system. That is indeed an increase in the acceleration of all of this, which also speaks volumes of the fact that potentially there is more supply coming in from the Iranian chain. Again, they're funded by the Iranians, and they're giving them more sophisticated missiles that are allowing them to make these hits and, of course, have these successes. So that's, of course, part of the larger concern, not to mention the fact that the successful attacks by the Houthis are revealing the gaps in the Israeli missile defense systems, and what are the Israelis doing about that? That being said, the Israelis did indeed retaliate Hodeidah, and there was an attack on Sana'a. They're going after attacks in Yemen to deter these attacks. But again, this is yet another front that Israel is forced to deal with, which is a constant element. And of course, another reminder that of where the war is coming from, that is from the Islamic Republic of Iran.
And you are taking a live look once again over the Israel-Gaza border. We've talked a lot, especially you and I, just about the potential for that ceasefire. And we've now heard from two former U.S. officials. They wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal saying that the release of the 7 remaining American hostages has to be a part of the first phase of any kind of deal between Israel and Hamas. We know this is Trump's former national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, and Biden's previous U.S. ambassador to Israel, Tom Nides. They wrote, quote, "The American 7 aren't a bargaining chip." Israeli officials do believe that 96 of the 251 hostages abducted by Hamas are still there in Gaza, and that includes the bodies of at least 34 of the hostages. Do you feel that once President-elect Donald Trump does take office, that bringing home the American hostages is going to be a priority?
Well, I think that the hope is that the Biden administration hopes that they can make this happen before Trump, enters office. Obviously, they need a win, and obviously the op-ed that you're referring to and the fact that Tom Nides is involved in that, penning that op-ed is clear about the fact that they would like to have a win before they leave office to show a successful transition of power and to show that they've done something successfully with regard to the American hostages. There's been a great deal of pressure reminding the world that there are still Americans in Gaza, and where is the pressure coming from the United States? That being said, if this passes January 20th. Clearly, Trump made unequivocal statements about what he expects to happen, and not to mention the fact that he is going to use force to move things along. I think that they are close, or those are the rumors at least that we're seeing now as far as a deal. It is a emotional roller coaster, as you and I have discussed for the past year now, how the hostages have been used as political pawns all around. Now that Hamas is at 90+% devastated, the hope is that they can squeeze Hamas to move this along. And there have been all these carrots that have been delivered and given to the Hamas members, saying you can escape here, you can leave, you can go to areas of like Turkey and Doha and other places, just release the hostages back and to move this along. The other bargaining chip on the table, which is part of the conversation, has been the infamous Palestinian leader Marwan Barghouti. Barghouti is serving over 5 or 7, I believe, life sentences plus 50 years for all of his blood on his hands during the second Intifada back in the early 2000s. He was a crony of Yasser Arafat, but he is believed to be the heir apparent, and so Hamas is using him. And on all these kind of conversations, his name has been thrown out there time and time again. With the idea, again, part of this point that I was raising before, of extradition to Turkey and then returning back. I think it'll be, he does have a lot of blood on his hands, and that would be a huge mistake to move that along. But these are the kind of high level individuals of terrorists that they're talking about in return for the hostages. And that's really the kind of game that you're playing here, as far as the high value prisoners that the Israelis currently have versus, as you said, the 96 that Israel believes to have alive, not to mention the dead bodies, to bring them, return them back to a Jewish burial and bring them back home. This is the emotional roller coaster, and this is the pressure that has been coming from the beginning from the Israeli population on the Netanyahu government. We need to make a deal at any cost, and that's where you're seeing a lot of the push and pull play out here.
And one of the questions here for a very long time has been about how many of those hostages are still living. The fact that there hasn't been a list that is provided to Israel, a list that was asked for, frankly, a year ago. We've talked about this for months upon months, and that list has not been provided. So is that going to provide more fear about the conditions of the hostages? But also, does Hamas know where all of these hostages even are?
That's the main concern, and the bigger concern is there's going to be a kind of a bait and switch. Hamas does not want to be confined to any kind of written, designated commitments. They have done these bait and switch deals before. We'll say, we're going to agree to this, and we'll provide you with dead bodies versus alive. I mean, this is a constant game that the Israelis have. And to your point, as you said correctly, since the beginning, the Red Cross has never been allowed to go in. We don't know exact name. We don't know conditions. There are a lot of speculations as to their whereabouts and whatnot. The hope is, I mean, again, this is all part of the interlocutors vis-a-vis the Egyptians and the pressure coming from the United States, that Hamas is gathering all the information to provide when it comes to the whereabouts of the hostages. Most likely, what we do know is that whatever is this kind of remnants of the Hamas leadership in Gaza, like with Sinwar before, they are basically surrounding themselves by the hostages because they are the lifeline. Not to mention the fact that they are the hardcore Hamas Islamists who embed themselves within the civilian population. As we've seen with previous hostages, that's where they're most likely being hid. And they are used there as target practice, as we've heard from the other hostages, that some of these neighborhoods, when they were targeted, they would put out the hostages first in order to create them as the first line of defense. So this is what the unfortunate reality that we're looking at here, and what we need to, and this is where the pressure is coming down. the hope is that they can give enough carrots, and there could be, and the patrons of Hamas, namely groups, like the Egyptians and like Doha and others, they can squeeze them to make this deal happen.
Dr. Asaf Romirowsky, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to join us and help break down all the latest developments. We appreciate it, as always.
Thank you, as always. I appreciate it.